Hey there guys, it's Tomster from Indie Structural Productions once again, and this time we're actually gonna be going over a video that I wanted to do as the first video of 2020. Well, it's a few months past that now, and yeah, I just never got around to actually having the time to make this video, so I'm gonna do it now. The basic idea is going over my favorite guitars of the past decade. Seeing as I've been doing this for, I want to say 9 years or something like that. I'm not quite sure. Like, I've been working on guitars for about 9 years, close to 10 years. And I just wanted to go over some history with you guys. So at first I was going to do my favorite guitars that I've worked on, not favorite guitars that I've built, because that list is much smaller. Favorite guitars that I've actually worked on in the past decade. And I realized that would be cutting out quite a lot of things because there's quite a lot of missteps along that way. So I'm going to do a two-parter. I'm going to film it in one go. If some parts seem a bit off, that's probably because I couldn't fix it in the edit. But this first video is going to be going over my favorite guitars that I've worked on in the past decade. And then the next video is going to be like, oh boy, all the mishaps and embarrassing moments and things just that just didn't work out. And yeah, you can laugh at me then. And just, yeah, cringy stuff. I figured that the best way to start would be, or kind of go about this chronologically. So the best place to start would be, in fact, the beginning of where I started things. Now, I started off guitar work in general by doing custom paint jobs on things. Now, the very first guitar I had was this old Squier Strat, a tobacco burst type thing, because I wanted to learn how to do play the guitar, and my friend had a Squier that he didn't use because, quote unquote, it didn't work. Looking back on it, all it needed was just setup and truss rod adjustment and stuff like that, but I didn't know. So it stayed in tune for about, I don't know. It stayed in tune up until he started playing. So probably needed new springs as well in the trim. But anyway, I, at some point, wanted to start repainting it. And this came about. Now, the way that this came about was I was actually watching, on TV, I was watching Conan O'Brien, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and John Mayer was the musical guest. And he was playing this guitar that I saw very pixelated because the screen was horrible and was like, it wasn't on TV per se. I was watching it on my computer, like a TV broadcast through my computer. So it was just mushy, a pixel mess. And I saw the guitar that he was playing and I thought it was really cool. So I started to draw down what I thought were the designs and just throwing my own kind of stuff in there, like this and that, which is my tattoo. But little did I know, I only found this out much later on, that it is a Hendrix Strat, basically. And really funny because I couldn't really see it properly. But if you compare this to what I made, they're not far off. I mean, granted, it's missing a row, like the little rows here, there. And then I had no idea what was going on there, so I just made up shapes. But I can see that I'm pointing at the screen. I should be pointing with the mouse. That shape, at least, is the same-ish kind of thing as here. Those I got pretty much spot on. Pretty much, roughly. But yeah, I just painted it by hand and went with it, and this is what it came to. And quite honestly, I've always liked that little story because it's, yeah, I learned a lot from painting this. It has the fade that I did with just rattle cans, spray cans. So first I painted it white with just like household paints for like furniture. Then I used rattle can to get that sort of fade on it. Then next up there was this no brand guitar that my sister had lying around from her ex-husband, which needed a good do-over, like the whole 9 yards, and wanted to gift it to my nephew. So I took it apart, sanded it, and everything else, and I made this, which I started calling Rocky, but it's actually supposed to be Rock and then just a nice little design. But it does look like it says Rocky. Yeah, so once again, sanded it down, painted the whole thing. This was my first guitar building video, actually. I'll see if I can find it. And I call it guitar renovation. But yeah, this is what it looked like at first. And I basically just took it apart, painted it by hand, or, well, first I sprayed it, and you're gonna laugh at this, but yeah, I sprayed it on top of newspaper like that. So of course there was a bunch of newspaper stuck to the bottom of it once I got it done, and all kinds of like twigs and little bits of leaves. So not the cleanest paint job, but I didn't know what I was doing back then. So this is 2010, and yeah, it actually turned out better than my own guitar at the time, which was this. One project that I really did like was I got this old West Tone, however you want to pronounce that, West Tone, Weston, I don't know, LP style guitar. They don't sell these anymore anywhere. I can't find them. It cost me about 90 bucks, and I wanted to do something very different to it. So I went ahead, started customizing it, and did the chip carving, or I removed all the paint. This is the first series I put on YouTube for the IP YouTube page on customizing this, and I wanted to basically make it rugged, do chip carving because I love to do that, and painted it, put lacquer on it. This was my first inlay job as well, which you can see here. Actually, I have the guitar here. So my first inlay job ever, Tomster, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't remove the frets either. The fretboard looks gnarly, to say the least, but I did learn that way. The yin-yang symbol on the 12th fret, once again, didn't take out the frets. That caused issues because now the 12th fret doesn't really play because the fret itself is damn low. I have refretted this, but that didn't fix the issue. I should take that out, put something in, and then resaw the fret slot, but it has binding, so that's an issue. I'll figure something out to actually make it play. But yeah, so it's mother of pearl and blue glass shards, or blue glass that I just kind of broke apart. My friend did the pickups. He's a blacksmith, so he burned up the pickup covers. I wanted to wax pot them, but I didn't know what wax potting was, so I just put or lit a candle and poured candle wax in there and stuck them in. That doesn't work. That's not the point. Yeah. Wow. The back I completely butchered. There was, because I taped off the back, not with masking tape, but with aluminum tape. Now everybody who's used that knows that once you take it off, it leaves behind a lot of glue residue. And that's what happened, and I never really got rid of that for a very, very long time until I went back to this guitar and wanted to do it up a bit. So I removed the black paint, scraped away the binding, removed the finish with a heat gun, and made it look even more rusticy, relic-y, just, yeah, nasty and gross. And I electroplated all the hardware, so I made them copper. And that has really worked out very well. Really nice looking detail there, in my opinion. And I've been using this now after the refret, and you can go watch the refret video where I take away all the frets, I sand down the fretboard, get it cleaned up, oil it, and put in new frets and actually get it working, because it was also my first fret job. It was the first fret job was something I filmed when I got the fret leveling file from Crimson and did a review of it. I took away way too much, and the frets ended up being flat on the top because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just following a couple of Ben's old videos and I thought I was doing the right thing, but turns out I wasn't. Fun fact, that fret leveling file was one of the first tools that Ben ever sent out. He told me this, apparently, and there was like me and another guy, and then I was the first one to ever make a Crimson Guitars tool review. That's pretty cool. And did it up. Now it plays really well. I have it tuned in a baritone tuning. Took away the pickups ages ago, put them in another guitar. Now it just has a Seymour Duncan distortion. And this is what I use at band practice nowadays. So not all of these early custom jobs were that horrible. Some of them were pretty good. Yeah. So from there, I started doing carpentry in school, and that led to an idea between myself and Jay where we would buy old guitars that nobody was using because they were damaged or just neglected, and buy them for cheap and then customize them to make them something that we could then sell onwards for a little bit more. Now at the same time, we then got this BC Rich Brass City art collection, and yep, as you can see, it is a gorgeous guitar. Yeah, naturally, because it's so pointy, it has things coming off of it. With that one as well, we took it apart and redid it a bit. But the Banshee that or the BC Rich, which we ended up calling Banshee, we took to Jay's cabin, we burned it, which the video for this has become one of the more infamous videos on the IP channel, because back then I was living in an apartment with my girlfriend and her mother, and I had to film the commentary early that morning in order for me to actually get the video out that day. And you can still, I think you can still find this on the IP channel, but because of that, I had to whisper, and everybody's just downvoted and just like unliked and commented a lot of stuff because I'm whispering and they're saying that's an ASMR guitar building video. It's just so, it's too funny for me to take down. I've deleted some videos off of the channel, but it's just too funny, so I keep it there just for good laughs. So this is, yeah, 2014. And then we added brass plates that I engraved, made look nice and pretty-ish. I made a strap out of an old belt, and yeah, this is what the first iteration of it looks like. Didn't cover the pickups, didn't get this sold. I wonder why. Those are horrible. And then we got to work on redoing it. But before we redid that, there was a couple of others in between. Now first was the first initial prototype guitar, which was the 7 Deadly Sins concept guitar, Wrath. And this was the first body and first neck that I ever made. I think the fretboard is something that I had ready, but this was the first guitar, technically, that I somewhat finished. I don't know what I was thinking with the headstock, pointy, and yeah, just, it is what it is. I like the idea of the guitar. I like where we're going, but just in general, it didn't work out all that well. So in the end, I ended up filling up or routing out the pickup cavities and the bridge position because they were, as you can see, not centered and off completely. I added a burl veneer top. I remade an entire new neck, and it ended up looking like this. So going from what it was, going from this to this is quite a leap. And I really like this guitar as well. There's of course issues with it because it is the first body that I've built, but it's sort of like one of those legacy guitars. It is what it is, and I like it. It plays really well. The neck on it is amazing. It's really lightweight, even though it's a full walnut body with some beech in it. It's really freaking lightweight. Even it's actually a lot lighter in weight than this is, because even though this is very, very thin, for some reason it has a lot of weight to it. I don't know what the body wood is. At this point, it's very hard to figure out because it's so scratched up and looks bad, but this is a very heavy guitar, and that is much lighter in weight. I guess I'll rank this as one of the better guitars that I've made, not because of what it originally was, but what it became, because I really like it now. It has a walnut body with a couple of strips of beech in it, just because we had a lot of beech, and the original had a beech, completely beech neck, which was bad. It was the first neck I made, so it was extremely thin, and I almost went straight through. Fixed it up. I don't think I have some picture evidence of how bad some of the work was on it. Might somewhere, but I don't have it right now. Try looking for it. But anyway, and the new one has a beech and maple neck that was left over from the Scum build. Not the neck, but the wood. And then a Bubinga fretboard. Next up would be Monolith, which was the second customer build. Now, this one I actually really liked. It is a mahogany body with a mahogany neck. It's a neck through guitar, and the only thing I didn't make about this is the fretboard. The fretboard I ordered pre-slotted with the fret dot, with the position markers. That's the only thing I didn't do on it. But other than that, the body, neck, everything, first 90% build. I really like this finish when it was high gloss. The plates themselves, so the bridge plate, pick guard, and control plate, those are steel, made by my blacksmith friend once again. And this guitar ended up being a satin finish looking beastie, and it's far from perfect, but I still always kind of have a soft spot for this. It's something that I used very much as a learning experience, and I learned a lot from it, and it sounded massive. All right, next up was actually a Harley Benton kit guitar, which ended up being the Rose. Now, the Rose was one of the first guitars that I attempted to do a sort of burst stain finish. Not the first one. The first one was a bass that I forgot to mention. I'll show as well. Well, I did it with ink because I didn't understand what water-based stains were, because I couldn't find them anywhere, because I guess I couldn't really explain it to hardware store employees and hobby store employees and stuff like that. Anywho, this is what it ended up being. So just a nice little paint job with plywood truss lock cover and pickup rings, plywood pick guard that I hand painted. This was so much fun to paint. I got it clear coated, and then it got stolen from school. I don't know why someone would steal that, but hey, good on them. So I didn't end up remaking it at all. And that went from looking like this to looking like this. This was the second version, yeah, because I've now switched out the pickup rings. The covers have been burnt, and then I took away the paint on the back, or the varnish on the back, and added Osmo wax very poorly, because you can still see sanding marks here. So it wasn't sanded properly. There's scratch marks there. Plywood back plates. And yeah, it was still not quite great. Bending that was a lot of fun. The screws are horrible. So the Rose is something that we went back to almost every single year, or every year at around the same time we started working on it. And eventually, after a good few iterations, it became this beastie. So this is what it ended up looking like. So I used the stencil to paint a rose, and then hand paint some of the details on it. The back plates, and don't think I have pictures of the back plates. I don't have pictures, but the back plates and pickup rings, they're steel. Got rid of the pickup covers. Did good fret work again. Got rid of 2 pots. Filled up that. Sanded it flat on the back. Added a nicer carve, and basically moved it to just a single volume, single tone, and a switch. I have a carved rose on the headstock. The paint job isn't great, but yeah, this wasn't something that I did for me or for a client. I did this for Jay because he wanted to sell it onwards, and it got sold eventually because the guy wanted to buy a guitar case and he got this in the guitar case. But he was happy with it. He liked it. It played well. Now, one fun project was taking the old Banshee that you saw, and then because we couldn't get it sold because it's massive and it didn't look great, I wanted to make it more into a super strat kind of shape. So reshaped it and did scallop frets like that. Kept the old backplate, which was just a big block of brass, and added a glow-in-the-dark resin top, which I think looks badass, and lumen lay side dots. Now, this one I felt pretty happy about, and added covered pickups as well. It turned out all right. It's not too bad. Now let's see, where are we on the timeline? I'm roughly doing this in order, but I think the next one was before I went to England. Oh, while I'm in school, I did, as one of my coursework was work placement, I decided to go and, well, I decided to give Ben a call. And he was happy to have me down and go do my work placement there. So I went down to Crimson Guitars and worked there for 2 months as an intern. Now the first day, Ben hands me the Coppertop Guitar, which I have always loved. I have always loved this guitar. And tells me to take it apart. It's a $4,000 guitar. Don't mess it up. So yeah, I took it apart, and my job was to route it out completely and hollow it out. Make it into pretty much somewhat a hollow body instrument. Now I'm just gonna look at things real quick here. This is my blog that you can still go and check out. I'll put a link in the description below if you feel like you want to go read it. It is in English, and it's about my 2 months spent at Crimson. So the Coppertop guitar needed a copper back, and so I cut one out of the copper, glued it on. I think there's a picture of, yeah, here we go. So this is what I did to the Coppertop guitar. Completely hollowed it out for the most part to this stage, and then added a copper back to it. So to say that this was nerve-wracking is an understatement. Now while there, I'm just gonna go through a couple of my favorite guitars that I worked on while I was over there. I did a lot of tools, but this was fun. This was a nice telly with a burl top, and what I did with this was basically work on putting the oil on. I didn't really do too much of the actual work. I just did the finishing stuff on the telly and the neck. This neck went on a different telly though. Worked on the Coppertop copperback guitar quite a lot. That was kind of one of my main projects while over there. Then the next guitar over there was this Dissident model that Ben had stripped down, sandblasted, and I was to do the finishing on it. So I stained the top and lacquered it, same way that I worked on the Coppertop guitar. I worked on that and finished it, or did the finishing on it, I should say. There's what it's eventually going to look like, nice and black. Eventually, Ben went to spray a flip-flop finish on that guitar there. Oh yeah, and I did the headstock too. I really like that guitar. Here's what they look like in the spray booth. Now these two, I really love these two. They were so much fun to work on, and I'm a bit biased, I guess, toward the Coppertop. Always have been, but it is one of my favorite Crimson guitars. But my favorite is Aah. Now I went to Yandles with Crimson, and this guitar had been just, or the body had been done, but the top hadn't been carved. So it had been rough carved with chisels, and for 2 days, I spent these little thumb planes and scrapers to carve out the B-Benga top. And let me tell you, the blisters on my fingers were multitude. There were many of them, but yeah, that's what I spent 2 days doing. And yeah, needless to say, it has a soft spot in my heart, and I've always liked it. And the finished product, I've really liked, and I really like the sound of it. I think I said really way too many times there. Working on the finishing, yeah, another show coming up. I worked on this PAF just by adding or doing the electronics and just oiling the neck. Worked on Ben's little wall of tools. Yeah, but this was my main showcase thing that I worked on at Crimson. It was taking this bass that was never finished for a client. Well, he wanted a meld of a precision bass and a Music Man bass. So this is kind of the best of both worlds in that way. But this is what I had in the beginning to work with. Really rough, really rough made body and really rough made neck, which weren't in the best shape already at that point. But I got to work, did everything from that point onwards by hand. This is what it ended up looking like. And yeah, I think it turned out pretty well. I liked it. There was just one little hiccup that I did wrong because I went into autopilot in a way where the jack socket was supposed to be on the front, but I put it on the side. I talked with the customer and he was completely fine with this. On the phone, I talked to him, made sure it was okay. And this is what it looked like on the back. Fun fact, those heel ferrules aren't actually ferrules, they're strap buttons. Then there was a telly that came in that wanted one of those MIDI pads that like Matt Bellamy has. So I basically routed out and fitted a MIDI controller onto this telly. Ended up looking like this. I don't like wiring work all that much. Back then I hated it. So that was a little nerve-wracking. Then there were two Les Paul kit builds that I helped Tom out with, but those were just really rough work. They're basically twins, like this, flame maple top and a Wenge top. And I just processed the woods for them. I didn't do too much else. Yeah, I also fixed up some of the spray guns because they weren't in that great shape. But I mean, look at these. Look at that. Looks so cool. Now what happened to that Coppertop is Jamie came to work at Crimson, and then he got to work on that, and he was drilling the holes for the bridge, and he went through and popped the back off, put a big hole in it. So yeah, destroyed all my hard work. Yeah, I've joked about it many times in the past. I'm not gonna bug him too much about that anymore. What's done is done, and it ended up looking very different in the end. Actually, I have a picture of it, kinda. Well, it's there. It ended up going to, I can't remember the name of the shop now, so I'm not going to say it because I don't remember the name. I'm trying to see if there's any other ones that I might have missed out. Yeah, did the Crimson logo as well out of mother of pearl on 2 guitars. They actually look pretty nice. Then there was the first Crimson Guitars raw guitar, which was something that Tom built in a matter of like a day and a half, and I built the stand for it out of the leftover body. Now this was not the Mithril, but the Mithril because it was spelt wrong. And that went to the Northwest Guitar Show. You can see it here. Right there. And there's the finished Dissident with the flip-flop finish that Ben put on it. Now this show was a lot of fun. That guitar was so cool and so much fun. I really enjoyed it, and it actually got sold at that show. And it was really cool to actually be there to help work. Oh yeah, I did work on a little bit on that. Just putting finishing touches, worked on the nut a little bit. Really cool to have worked on a sort of the start to what became the raw guitars that Crimson are known for nowadays. So Jamie is just starting work here. I'm carving up a PRS style kit neck. So if you have that kit neck, I made it. There's probably quite a lot of those that went out. So then there was Gonzalo Alves neck as well that I did. And then I was working on this. headless, Wenge and Purple Heart neck as well, helping Tom out, finishing those up. Yep, and then I did some of the final type setup stuff on this. Had to sand down a crack here, fill it up, and make it look really, really nice and pretty. So final stages of that raw guitar, worked on that, so that was a lot of fun. Finished oiling the neck for this, or the replacement neck for this Telecaster. Now, this is just me roughly going through, because there's a lot that I did. I really like the top, but technically when it comes down to it, I didn't work on it too much. So I can't say that it's like one of my favorite things that I worked on. I really liked working on the first raw guitar. That was a lot of fun. So I guess from my Crimson internship, it's gotta be the bass, it gotta be the raw guitar, and the Coppertop and Dissident. Those are my favorites from that time. It was a lot of fun. I also got to work on the Clarity build just a little bit. Got to work on this 5-string acoustic bass. Got to remove frets and do scalloping, or got to remove frets and do some scalloping stuff for this Ibanez. Mikko had this old Ibanez that was a little worse for wear, needed a new paint job, so I did that and made a review of the stunning stains and oil while doing this guitar. That turned out really, really cool. I really like it, and it plays really well. That's one of the guitars that I really like working on as well. I'm looking at how things went in order. I guess I'll go in order of things I finished instead of things I worked on, because there's a lot of overlap between working on things but never finishing them up until much, much later. And yeah. Now, one of the next things that I finished was actually the Ruby guitar. And this is something that I made as a tribute to Rooster Teeth and the show Ruby, if you haven't heard of it. I've been following Rooster Teeth forever, and I wanted to give something back. So I made this little fan art piece in my living room. Literally there, you can see me building it in my living room, with almost no appropriate tools whatsoever, but I got it made, I got it done, and I sent it to Texas to the animation department. The pick guard itself is steel that my friend Nikki made. You can see it there. And I painted black. Inlays and everything else I did by hand, painted a rose by hand. That's on the top there. There's a close-up of some of the horrible inlay work that I also live streamed, so you can find the live stream of me doing that and failing miserably on the IP Facebook page. But yeah, this is one of those in-between guitars that I don't really like the finished product. It's really not great, but I love the fact of what it is and the story behind it and where it is now. So I guess it wins in that category to be in one of my favorite guitars that I've worked on in the last decade. Now, this was the last guitar that I worked on before moving to England to work at Crimson Guitars full time. One of the first guitars there was just this one series, ash body. Let's have a look if I can find some, but I'm just gonna quickly flip through some of the favorite things that I worked on there. This raw is my favorite raw guitar from Crimson. I did the final sanding and I did the finishing on it. This is special in many ways, but special in the way as well where the roundovers I did by hand with the sander, which were a bit too big for, production. They have to always be the same, but I actually made it too big because I misunderstood some instruction that I was given. But I think it works very well, looks really nice. I love this guitar. That part, the crack, was a pain to apply oil to because there was tissue paper in there. I can actually see some tissue right there. Yeah, but then that guitar was one of my favorites. There was also this artist series that I just did the cleanup and final setup on, and assembly and electronics. Well, no, I didn't do the electronics. I did the setup and assembly on this one, and it looks gorgeous. Then on from there, I worked on a lot of raw stuff. Basically, for many of the guitars, what I did was most of, if not all, the sanding, and then most of the finishing, or mostly I worked on finishing, which then led to me being a part of the finishing department and the finisher of the company, alongside Christopher helping or teaching me. The thing that actually made me Absolute Music, that's the name of the store. The thing that actually put me in the position to do finishing was me working on these guitars up on the wall here. So I remember doing this one, a little bit of that one, so sanding and oiling. I did make a black 1 series, but it's not this one, it's another one that I had to finish in 15 work hours, I think, or 30 work hours, and I just didn't quite get it strung up, but yeah. Oh, I also did most of the nuts for the 1 series and the artist series back in those days. I did the blue 1 series staining, and I did the purple, and I really like the purple. The purple's really nice. I've always liked it. One of the easiest ways to kind of have a look at everything I've worked on at Crimson is by looking at some of the what's on the benches, because I think that's probably shows somewhat. Nope, that's where I was building a bench or building a shelving, so that doesn't really count toward guitars. I believe back then I was working in Christopher's studio. So 1 series, that's the 1 series that I showed you just a little bit ago. This is just Crimson advertising at this point. All right, so camera cut out a little bit, got a little recharged and everything else, and we're back at it. So I realized that next up, before going back to the what's on the benches, there's actually one of my favorite guitars that I don't have anymore. This was my first proper guitar. It still cost like $100 and something because I bought it off of Rondo Music, but it was my old SX Natural Ash with a Floyd Rose that I hated, and I wanted to do it up a little bit. So this is what it looked like in the beginning before I did anything to it. I mean, of course, I've taken it apart now. Those are Trivium signatures right there. But yeah, I decided to do it up, so I restained it. First, I did, well, sanded the whole lot down, then black, did a little fade, then sanded that down, then did purple, sanded that down, and then did red. Now, I really, really, really like how this color came out, and I'm gonna be using it in the future quite a bit because that's just sexy. Then I just used oil to finish it, and it ended up looking like this. Now, this is the final product, and this was actually the picture that I took when I was gonna sell it away, or when I sold it away. So this guitar is no more. I do not have it anymore, which is a shame. It was a ridiculous riff machine, but I just didn't, for many, many years, this was a great guitar, but it was time to move on to bigger and better things. Moving onwards, going back to the what's on the benches. So here is the one with the cracked lacquer. The PAF hollow, something had gone wrong, so a couple of guitars that had been sprayed needed to be completely stripped down and resprayed. So I'm in the process of stripping down all the old finish off of this and preparing it for new stain and new clear coat. Meanwhile, I've been putting clear coat on this, and these two I really, really like. The colors came out really nice, and they were a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure that there's some video where you can see, but this got a really nice, like every time I sprayed it, it got a really good coat on it. So I really like how that came out. There's a couple of Ash guitars that I had, or Lake Ash that I had worked on. There's the purple one series that I worked on. That's one of my favorite guitars, the purple one. But I'm a sucker for purple. So moving onwards, I already did some research, so I checked things out a little bit beforehand, so I don't need to keep on waiting around, because I realized the previous recording that I did was a bit over an hour of just footage. But now, of course, my internet is all patchy, but I like that. I like the blue and the purple guitars. They turned out really nice, and I really like them. So on the list of some of my favorites. Now this is the hollow that I talked about, and did the stain, and it's getting clear coat on it. Good, there. So it's sort of like a denim blue, but instead of using the denim blue they had, because I realized that the stain was a little bit dull and gray, I used royal blue and water. But instead I like kind of diluted the royal blue down a little bit, but then I once I had applied it onto the surface, I sprayed it with water and wiped down the surface again, and then I got this really cool effect on it, which is sort of like a denim, almost baby blue kind of thing. I think it turned out pretty good. Oh god, my red hair. Yep, still working on that. This one, I helped out just a little bit. I know it's Ben's build. I didn't do anything major, but if I'm not mistaken, I did, yeah, the back of the headstock I stained to match the neck. And that's pretty much the only thing I did with that one. Another Robert Fripp model that I worked on was this. Natural Beauty. So for this one I did all the oiling to get it to this really nice sheen, and I think it came out very nicely. I also did my first spray burst at Crimson, and it was for this guitar. So at first did a sort of cherry burst, then it got darker to almost a tobacco burst, then black around the sides. And yeah, this was so much fun. I really loved doing the burst on it, and in general the guitar was very cool. I liked it. So that's on the list of cool things I worked on. Let's see, we're in April it seems, so let's go back to this. So this is a kit guitar, once again the Harley Benton kit guitar, that I worked on over the course of 4 years in 4 different apartments, 2 different countries. And the idea came from, I want to make a customized guitar for Trivium. So when they were putting out their record, which before the record came out, I bought this guitar already, and I decided that I'm going to chip carve the cover art. Now they had just put out In Waves, and I was like, okay, so it's not going to be anything too majorly difficult or over detailed. Well, they put out Vengeance Falls, which is just ridiculously packed full of details, and yeah. I set about at first, the first thing we got we got the artwork, and then we got these lyrics. So I engraved the lyrics onto the side, engraved the top by hand, and then set to work on it over at my old apartment with my ex-girlfriend, then at school, then at my own place, and then finally finishing it at Crimson in 2017. And it is like, there's a couple of things that make this a really important instrument to me. First off is the whole learning experience of it and the end result. I'm really, really, really happy with how it turned out, even with everything considered. It became a sort of passion project, and I'm glad that I dug it up to get it finished. And then I went to a Trivium concert in Helsinki, and I handed this guitar over to them. So this guitar went to Trivium because it was made for Trivium, and I'm really happy about that. That's very close to one of my favorites that I've worked on. Not my favorite guitar that I worked on, but one of my favorite like custom job type things. Then back again at Crimson, this left-handed PAF hollow, I did a lot of oiling and waxing, like Ben said, and I also did the staining on it. The purple color came out so cool and so deep because I have a certain way that I like to do staining, and for this one it just worked out so well, and I'm glad at how the color came out. That's the natural Fripp over there, but something else that was in the previous, was on the bench in the background, was this one. So for this I also did clear coats and then the burst. but this is a student's guitar that he didn't manage to finish, so I worked on it for him to get it finished up. So as things wrapped up at Crimson, I came back home, and or before that, of course, what am I talking about? So the very last thing that I worked on while in England and then finished back home was the Scum. And this is really close to the top of my favorite guitars that I've worked on in the past 10 years. This is just, it was kind of like I wanted to do things that really looked cool. This back inlay was one of my favorite things that I've done in a very long time, and it still stands the test of time. So it is ebony and flamed maple, all cut by hand and inlaid in, so these are 1, 2, then the body was inlaid, then the wings, the extra stuff, that piece, engraved and filled. The skeleton was, I think, 2 or 3 different pieces. 3 different pieces because the skull. And it turned out really great. So I made this guitar for Jay, and it is one of my favorite guitars, and I really want to come back to that shape again sometime soon. Now, that's after coming back home. One of the first guitars that I finished was, it wasn't one of the first guitars that I finished, but one of the first guitars that I started working on was the Aah Guitar. So the Achievement Hunter guitar that I then sent to Texas to Achievement Hunter. And this was, man, this was a project. It had very extensive inlay work, hand painted, yes, hand painted lettering, as well as, there you can see on the neck, hand painted some lyrics. There you can see all of it. Some inlay work. This was definitely very intricate, and it went on a full journey of going to the States, coming back, and then going all the way back to the States again, and finally reaching Achievement Hunter in the end, and them unboxing it in one of their videos. And that made me so happy. Then we have the, oh, I forgot to mention as well, there is the guitars, the signature guitar for Phil. I worked on that as well. I think I did some of the sanding. I worked on Toby's and Phil's guitars. We couldn't do the lacquering because we were running out of time, but I stained Phil's body, and I think the blue came out really nice. And I worked on the back plates as well. There's a video from when we were working after hours trying to get things done in time. I think I throw a thumbs up at some point. Yep, there we go. But yeah, now we're starting to reach into the part of, there's less and less of guitars that didn't work out, and more guitars that I actually feel somewhat proud of. Oh, I lie. The Achievement Hunter guitar was not the first one that I worked on. This one was. So I had a old Ibanez Stage Star, and I did some heavy modding work on it, customization. Changed the body shape, made it a lot thinner, and put a oak top on it, did a lot of carves, and then I handed it over to a local artist, Threefer, who has done this mural as well, and gave him free hands to do whatever he wanted for the paint job. And it ended up looking like no other guitar that I've really worked on before. It's unique. It's more of an art piece than anything else. And this sparked the Icarus body shape. And I was thinking about that. The Achievement Hunter didn't sound right, but I did work on the Achievement Hunter sometime later. Let's have a look. I think trying to capture the screen is kind of not really working all that well. I don't remember the exact order of things, but I do know that 2 of the guitars that I finished next were the Cheeky prototype, or Telecaster, as it was lovingly called, which is the dataless prototype right here. I really, really like this guitar. It turned out exactly as we wanted it to, and the whole point with Telecaster was, well, the hint's in the name, cheeky, because it's using what we had at hand and made out of quote-unquote cheeky parts. The top is an oak top, which is used to be a tabletop. The birch body is kind of knotty, knot, like wood knot, knot-y. And the fretboard is actually, if somebody remembers the Crimson Guitars, not slotting file multi-tool thing, those had handles made out of green oak or holm oak, and this fretboard is exactly one of those pieces that I had cut down for Ben, but it was too small to be used, or it was an extra piece that wasn't used, and Ben gave it to me as sort of like, here you go, thanks for helping out type of thing, use it for a fretboard or something. So I used it for a fretboard. It dried out for many years, because I got it back in 2014 and I only used it in, I can't remember what year this was, 2018, I think. And the neck is merbau and mahogany, which were planks that were to be used for skirting boards. And the twin to that is the Icarus, this one, which has one of my favorite stain jobs that I've ever done. This color came out so well, and I'm gonna keep on using it. Kind of the same principle, but Wenge fretboard with a mahogany and rosewood neck. So I really, really like these two guitars. They're up there amongst my favorites. Oceana is not something I participated in. Jay actually worked on this. This was the first guitar that I taught somebody else how to do things. So he basically took out a lot of excess in order to make it pretty much hollow in the middle, added an oak top to it, like so, got it carved out, filled it with resin in parts, added a little block to block out the trem, filled that part with resin, like so. Sanded it down, made it look nice, stained it this really deep blue, and it ended up looking spectacular. It just, yeah. And I added the sound hole then later on. But only thing I did for this was teach Jay how to do it. Then I cut the sound hole and I stained the headstock. But other than that, that's all his work, and he did a phenomenal job in my opinion. This is a very interesting feature, this part, and the back of it looks so cool. The color is amazing. Then came time to actually have the first IP endorsement. So Johnny Grinds, who plays in neurosurgery, amongst other projects, but this is his bass for neurosurgery. And it is a 3-string fretless bass. And yeah, it's relict. It has actual blood on it. And there's a full video series for you to check out. I'll put a notification here. And as you can see, it says 0019, which means it's the 19th fully custom, or 19th in my customs, I think. I've lost track of how many guitars I've made, quite honestly, but that's the number that's carried over, so it checks out. I realized that I left out the 18th. Oh, here, this was fun. So my first ever Cigar Box Guitar. This was definitely a lot of fun, and I tried to do it as much with hand tools as possible and not go to the workshop at all. The only thing I did was the scoop at the headstock, but other than that, I've pretty much made it all by hand at home. And this was so much fun. Definitely a learning experience, but different to what I've done. Then I guess that because we've covered a lot of these already, and I'm starting to kind of lose sight of everything that's happened. I need to go back and check on what I've worked on. Gaia, how could I forget? So Jay commissioned a sort of kit build from me. He wanted a multi-string T-style or multi-scale T-style baritone guitar. So I made Gaia and we demoed it and worked on it for a very long time, and then eventually it formed into, so here we are. Here's Gaia in its final form. So basically we wanted to then, or Jay didn't have a use for it, so I came back and I started working on it much more in depth. Decided we wanted to put a pick guard on it, redo the finish. It was an oil finish, so we took that off, put a high gloss. It used to have a baseball bat neck, but I made it into a very slim neck, added some more access onto the higher frets, put a veneer cap on the headstock, and in general just made the carves on the back much more comfortable. And yeah, this was such a fun instrument. It was a pain in the ass at times, but definitely up on the list of favorite pieces that I've done, because the finishing job just ended up looking really, really good. Then, quite honestly, because there's so many guitars still coming up, this is my new favorite. So, the Pine Guitar Challenge, which is the 100% pine guitar with the pine body, pine neck, and pine fretboard, and it sounds, looks, and plays great. This is currently one of my favorite guitars, just for the sake of what it is and how it came to be. And it was so much fun and rejuvenated and re-sparked my joy of making content on YouTube. So thanks to this, and thanks to all the positive feedback that I've gotten from it, so much positive feedback, that I will not stop and I will keep on going. There's so many cool things that are still coming up, and looking back on all the things that I've done makes me just realize how much cooler stuff is in the works right now. There's so much cool things. Overall, the list of things that I didn't like is fairly short, and is at the beginning of my guitar building career, if you want to call it that. And that is very telling of me learning from my mistakes. Of course, the first guitars are going to be god-awful, because you technically probably don't know what you're doing unless you're immediately trained to do what it is. But I learned from every single mistake that I've made, and I've been able to make much better guitars since then with every step that I take. And yeah, I'm happy with what the future holds. There's some really cool things coming up, and I hope that you will be there to see them too. So I guess that's that then. Thank you very much for watching this. Let me know what you think. Put it down in the comments, or write a comment down below. Tell me what you think. And yeah, I thought that was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. And be sure to check out next week when we go over some of the nastier guitars that I don't really like that much over the past 10 years or so. All right. Thank you very much for watching. See you guys.